Hello, and welcome back to the Modeling Success in Action podcast. I'm your host, Jessica, and today I am joined by Erica Trivett. Now, Erica had an extensive career in dance and the arts. She progressed towards functional movement and hands-on work slowly but surely. She completed her Feldenkrais Method training in 2006 in Paris, France, and in 2019, she completed her osteopathic training at the Canadian School of Osteopathy Manual Practice in Vancouver. Erica enjoys learning about the human form, in particular, human development and kinetics in embryology. She is fascinated by the changes and perspectives this adds to the scope of her work. She believes in teaching tools to the public that may assist in better autoregulation, health management, and graceful aging. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for having me.
So, for those people who are listening and they're going, Osteo, what? Do you want to do you want to let people know a little bit about, what exactly is osteopathy? Because you are definitely the first one I've had on this show, and you're the first osteopath that I've met in my life, and even though I've had lots of, experience with manual technicians, this was something new for me, and my experiences with you were totally new. So please,
Yeah,
invite us into your world.
I will. First of all, in Canada, well, in British Columbia, we're referred to as osteopathic practitioners. So just say osteo, it just makes it much simpler and easier, and you don't have to get worried about getting dinged by anyone. This is because actually osteopathy originally was founded by an allopathic physician in the United States. And in the US still today, at a certain point of history, there was some sort of reorganization in the way people were trained, but in the US, you are a medical physician. And in Canada and most places in the world, we are not. So we're not trained medically. But ultimately, osteopathy is a manual practice, a manual therapy, and it's based in a philosophy. And this philosophy has different principles, if you will. So the main principles and the ideas that really guide us in our work with people with a variety of concerns has got to do with our understanding that the body is a whole, body, mind, and spirit. As well, that the circulation of all fluids, so whether that be blood or lymphatic or interstitial fluid, cerebral spinal fluid, is of the utmost importance to maintain health, and that any obstruction to circulation will and could lead to some issues, symptoms, clinical signs, and maybe even pathology. And as well, that there's an interrelationship between structure and function. So the structure and the form, so ultimately like the anatomy and how it's moving and working. And then treatment is ultimately based on these principles. So we have ways to assess the body and then make adjustments, harmonize the body. That is an osteopathic treatment.
Yeah. The first time I ever went to visit Erica in her office, I wasn't exactly sure what to expect. I'd had chiro and massage and, acupuncture and all of those
Yeah.
things. The whole
Well,
kit had been.
My funny answer for
Yeah.
that is that if you took a massage therapist, a chiro, and an acupuncturist, and they had a baby, they would give and have
Yeah.
an osteo.
They'd have an osteo, and it's so true. There was some things that you were looking at my joints and my movement, but then there was other points where you're digging into the soft tissues, or even touching the organs themselves, from a
The connective
external.
tissue. Yeah.
Exactly. It was wild, but most of all, it was relaxing. Like
Yes. Yeah.
it activated the parasympathetic almost instantly, and I really did feel my whole body kind of go, drop
Yes.
down. And
It
even
does
when you were
generally
doing,
have a calming effect. Yes.
yeah, even when you were doing some things that were maybe not so comfortable, poking around at some, fascia or organs, and I was like, oh, okay, what's that? But yeah, the overall, effect really was quite down regulating, which was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nice
Yeah.
to hear.
Yeah. So, okay. So then you started off, with movement in your own life. So how did
Mm.
you get to wanting to do the hands-on functional, movement manipulation, and that kind of work with Feldenkrais and
Yeah.
osteo? Yeah.
Well, as a professional dancer, like ballet and contemporary dance, I had, of course, some history of injury. And throughout my career, I was always exposed to different kinds of practitioners with the companies that I worked with. And it wasn't until really my first bigger injury with a foot that I started to realize I needed to kind of broaden my perspective and get interested in some different modalities, and got interested in a method called the Feldenkrais Method, and entered into a training program in Paris quite quickly. So I was at that time. This was in the early 2000s, and I was living in Belgium, and so I went to Paris every year for a couple of weeks. Not bad.
Not the worst place to train.
Oh, yeah, it was blissful, to study and learn about this method, which is really about repatterning, whether it be movement and or behavior. And it was a 4 or 5 year training program, part time. So I was really sort of in and out in between my dancing. I was already teaching at that time and doing a little bit of choreography as well, and sort of beginning to kind of make this bigger transition towards something else. And when I ultimately decided to move back to Canada in around 2010, I continued to search for what would be the next best thing to support all the knowledge that I had acquired, and osteopathy was available to me. I was accepted as a student here in Vancouver and continued to teach dance work as a Feldenkrais practitioner, amongst other things, as I completed the training program, which was at that time 5 years, including a thesis project. Um, and I had experience and exposure to osteos in Europe. I remember a couple of people that had, in particular, one time I was performing in Belgium, actually, when I was dancing with Geneva Ballet, and an osteo was backstage. I was having trouble with my foot. And he just looked at me at one point. He didn't even touch me. He just looked at me. He said something like, "Oh, your navicular is high," or something, and it's a little bone in the foot. And I was like, "I don't know, okay." And so he did a few things onto my foot, and away I went. I was fine. So that was one of the first encounters that I had of some magic hands on my body in that particular context. It was great, and just got more and more intrigued. It is a fascinating modality field, and certainly very, it never stops the learning. There's always so many things to learn about the human form.
Hmm. So I'm curious, what's something that you were surprised, maybe in your own experience of in healing of, this new modality?
Hmm. I think I was just surprised. Well, the scope of what we can do. There are limitations, of course, and factors to consider with people, when working on their complaints. But um, this really just the scope of what we can address, from really sort of obvious, if you will, concerns or things that feel maybe more obvious, maybe more mechanical, but things that are a little bit more subtle. It does feel like magic. And even Andrew Taylor Still, the founder of osteopathy, shared a story of in one of his books about when he was beginning to train others. People didn't really understand what he was doing. This is in the US, in the Midwest, in 1870, early 1870s. And somebody came, I guess it was another physician, came and wanted to study from him. And I think Still gave him a bunch of books and anatomy books, and said, start studying and improving your anatomy. And, and the man sort of complained that it was a lot of work, that he thought it was really just magic. And I think that's a funny story. That it's not just like you know.
Not
Um,
witchcraft. Yeah.
no, no, but we just have a really good understanding of the way things work
Mhm.
and have an innate curiosity to continue to try and find ways in which to help people.
Mhm. Yeah, and with all of the, information of all of the different systems and how they're all connected, it allows you to be a bit more intuitive of how what might be leading, that and creating what's going on.
Yes, intuitive, but it's also you're understanding what mechanisms are behind or what
Yeah.
layers of the connective tissue you're working on or what system it is that might be causing the blockage, if you will, or the
Mhm.
strain.
Yeah, exactly. And you can kind of see where versus, somebody who's strictly musculoskeletal, or they're strictly looking at the nervous system, or they're only looking at the gut, being
Hmm.
able to bring in all those systems, you can really weave in, how might this thread be pulling on something else, in
Absolutely.
the
Yeah,
system.
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So then, you know, for you, what has been like the experience of the transition that you've seen in yourself or even in your clients when it comes to starting to lean into the more somatic, the more, hands-on work?
Can you say the question again?
So like moving into, maybe less of the
Mhm.
well, you were dancing and you said you kind of had seen all the things and you're moving into this more osteopathic, the
Okay.
Feldenkrais, this more somatic kind of, world.
Right.
What kind of changes have you seen even in yourself?
Oh, um, maybe just more paying attention to things that appear subtle, that they're very important. We just have to listen. It's like if you have a radio, you might have something in the foreground, but there might be something in the background, and maybe that thing in the background is actually more important. And I think thoughts can be that way too. Um, that we are easily distracted by things that are very loud and maybe more easily felt or observed. So the subtleties are very informative and I'd say more important.
Okay. Now, this is the
Yeah.
second time you've mentioned subtleties. Could you give us an example of a subtlety that people might be ignoring or not even noticing?
Well, I think your belly brain, so the enteric nervous system, is something people are definitely like more in tune to. But that would be a good example. So, observing that there's something sensorially happening in your abdomen, like right below the diaphragm. Like I feel something there, or I feel something here in the throat, or I feel something in the chest. It's not necessarily pain. Maybe it could be interpreted as a discomfort, but maybe it's more like a holding or activity. So those kinds of places to be in tune with, like, what does that actually mean? Is that related to something that's going on in your environment? Is it something that you ate? Is it something else? Is it something you don't know what it is? Or is it just, yeah, it's just present. So certainly, I think that there are certain people that are more in touch with those kinds of subtle observations about themselves and may listen and know how to listen. I do like to think that we're teaching kids how to listen differently and better. I think to my nephews who, had quiet meditative time in like preschool. So they were listening to themselves and observing themselves. And I think that, there are many way more practices that allow and bring us more to the foreground of our awareness and the importance of it and paying attention to health and wellness in general. Um, and then I would say also just the trust that comes with it. As a practitioner, it can be also really, I guess, easy to be distracted by the loud things, but to be patient and really wait to feel the things that are more subtle, that are more powerfully driven by certain mechanisms in the body. Um, that requires some time, and I see that I'm acquiring more patience. Always working on that. To wait for that to come present in the work.
Okay, so people can start to allow themselves to slow down, quiet down so that they can hear
Hmm.
those subtleties from their body, the little signals that are being sent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes, sometimes I'll ask somebody, "Oh, did you feel something or do you notice something?" And occasionally they don't. So, I would say that I'm progressing in the way I'm getting people to give me information. And if somebody is not able to feel something that I would like them to feel, that I need to be patient and maybe back up and bring them to observe certain things about their body that may be easier. Like, first of all, like what's your contact like on the table? What do you actually notice? When you
Hmm.
do like a body scan, are there places in your body that you feel are really clear? Like, where is it easy for you to notice? Oh, do you notice your right hand more than your left hand? Well, okay, if you're right-handed, you're more likely going to notice your right hand first, and it has actually even a larger scope of representation in your actual brain in an area called the homunculus. There may be areas in your body that feel like completely absent, or small, or very different perceptually when you tune into, like, oh, how do you feel your right leg different than your left leg? Like longer, shorter, wider, not there. So like, just sort of backing up and getting a sense of how people really notice their bodies is very important. And actually, in pain sciences, this kind of work has been shown to help improve and actually diminish pain, especially with chronic pain patterns. Uh,
Hmm.
but it's always fascinating just to see how different people perceive their bodies, and try to work on that with them as well. That
Yeah.
would be more in the scope of of Feldenkrais, but not solely. In osteopathy, we do use tools like this as well.
Hmm. But you're weaving together the principles of Feldenkrais into your osteo work or no?
Um, they do go mesh very well together. I'm still doing them separately, but there may be little elements because there are some commonalities in some of the objectives. There may be some commonalities, like in an osteopathic treatment. Afterwards, I may use some Feldenkrais movement, just basically some movement to integrate the treatment, more likely in that direction than in the other direction. In the beginning of my studies, before I was really an osteo, but I had some tools of assessment or just began to have some different tools, I would look at, for example, I'd have a better idea of how to assess the pelvis and the sacrum, the bottom of the spine. And so I would do an osteopathic assessment of the pelvis and sacrum, and then I'd just kind of leave that behind. I'd go ahead and do my functional integration, which is what you do in hands-on work in Feldenkrais. And then afterwards, I would return back to reassess or retest to see if there were changes in the hips and the pelvis. And sure enough, I had discovered that most of the time I had normalized or corrected, if you want to use that word, um, the the alignment basically was better. So, we all have different tools. And I sometimes, one of the reasons I studied osteopathy was because I really wanted to understand what Dr. Feldenkrais, the founder of that method, was, what he knew maybe, and what mechanisms of action he was using to do the work he did in that particular method.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had the benefit of having Erica come out and do a little demonstration of one of the Feldenkrais kind of classes
Yeah.
um, at my hypnosis studio, and it was really the homunculus was definitely mentioned that day, and like our perception and our mapping of the body. But you also led us through some pretty subtle techniques that
Yeah.
really showed us how when you shift one thing, it can really shift all kinds of other things.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as you were saying with the chronic pain, our perception, how big a piece of our body feels and how big that pain feels, if we can change our perception of it, we can change, the perception of the pain itself so that it can
Yeah.
become less, which
Yeah, I'm
is
sure
really
you work with
incredible.
that in your work as a hypnotist as well.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, for people who are struggling with their health, or even if it's physical or mental, what can they start to do? What would be a suggestion that you have for them to tune into the subtleties or to deal with their somatics or to start to support themselves?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say like curiosity. I feel, it may be a bit of a catch-22, but when you're having health issues, I think that it's really important to maintain curiosity and to try different things. That always what I did back in the day before there was an internet really available. I just started to get curious when I had a problem. And a doctor, I hated these words, there's nothing you can do. I was like, that just sounds so like minded to me. So go try classes, go try some different modalities in somatics. It is a very popular name, somatics. Soma just means of the body and generally means like modalities that are related to the body that have some usually like sensorial observation, scanning, and strategies to harmonize or work with the body and the central nervous system. So examples like Alexander technique, body mind centering, which is like traumatic release, Feldenkrais. There are others.
Even breath work.
Oh, absolutely. Breath work fits into that work, yoga. So go try different classes, go try different courses, go see different practitioners of different modalities, because I do find that if you maintain curiosity and if you try a little bit, if it's within your means, then you will encounter something and you will learn as you are trying to heal. There and with that, there are, I believe, on the internet, there are so many resources available for free. There are Feldenkrais lessons for free on the web. There are other modalities that offer free experiences for free. Uh, so that's one thing. And I would say to add, just keep asking and keep trying. That inevitably, yes, it may not solve all the problems, but you'll have different resources, and maybe something that you're exposed to might not be the answer of that moment, but maybe 5 or 10 years later down the line, you find yourself in another problem, and you have had that experience. So you're like, oh, I tried something back there. Maybe that would be helpful now. So that resourcefulness, I think, and curiosity is a huge part of health.
Yeah, I think it's a huge part of human, growth and just the experience that we have is to continue to be curious because when we're, so certain that something should be a certain way or some one thing should be the solution or should help, or even if we're thinking, I've got this diagnosis and I have this thing, so it is like this, being open to possibility and to,
Yeah.
opportunity and to be curious about what could make it better, right? Is what
Yeah.
could what could even shift my perception of it or my
Yeah.
experience of it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's even places like the Heart Math Institute. It has fantastic resources just about heart coherence in general, which has, and lots of science to back it up, for those skeptics. It's a fantastic resource. That's something that I'm sure overlap in both modalities that I work mostly in, but understanding the heart rate variability, gratitude, the vagal tone, things like that, if those words mean
Mhm.
things to your listeners.
Isn't that wild to hear, gratitude being thrown in with vagal tone, right? Like our thoughts are things. The things that we're focusing on really do impact the state of our body. In fact, that was one of the exercises that you took us through as we were doing a very subtle kind of movement of the knees, like windshield wipering the knees across, but we did it from two different moods, two different
Mhm.
zones in our mental awareness, and it changed the holding patterns in the body. It changed the movement, the flexibility of the body. It was incredible.
Quality, yeah.
Yeah, the quality and the tone of the muscles and the yeah, it was a pretty like aha moment to realize that when you're in that state of stress and anger or
Mhm.
fear or whatever, it creates resistance. It makes things a little bit harder. There's extra stress on the system.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with aging these days, there's also a lot of, and since it's Osteopathic Week and their focus is on aging, how osteopathy can help aging. If you're I hear a lot of people complain about aging. I'm getting older too. Yes, it is challenging, but I hear people getting very angry and frustrated about aging. So that mental state towards something that we can't change. You're just going to be getting older. And yes, it does get more frustrating. But if you're able to appreciate what you can do now and have gratitude for what is available, it may also change the movement and change the quality of your entire system and health. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, being in acceptance rather than in resistance.
Yes. It's a
Yeah,
very Eastern mindset, path of least resistance, acceptance. Yeah.
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 All right. So Erica, this has been awesome. Is there any final thoughts that you'd like to leave with anybody who's, beginning to start to walk down this path of getting in tune with their body and using
Hmm.
this kind of more full spectrum approach to supporting themselves and getting their outcomes, whether it's health or whatever?
Um, just seek out, there are osteopathic practitioners in BC. There's really good resource with Osteopathy BC and finding a practitioner. So making sure that you have a practitioner that has the highest standards. So that's a good resource to search for practitioners in your neighborhood. Um, yeah, eat well, drink lots of water, and take care of yourself. You're investing in your health. I think that's something that's important. Um, I'm just giggling because I was watching Saturday Night Live, and they made a commentary of like with the challenges that we're all facing with the financial milieu at this moment.
Yes.
They made a joke about how people are taking care of their health and how many people are seeing doctors, and they had this funny graph. It was super funny. So it is an investment, especially in times of stress as well. It's important to just continue to take care of yourself because you've got to be able to manage that stress, and continuing to have the support is going to allow you to enjoy the moment and enjoy what
Yeah.
we do have. We have a
Mhm.
lot.
Well, prioritizing health and your ability to take care of you is what lets you do all of those other things,
Yeah,
financial and
exactly.
otherwise.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it always
Clear
boggles
the
my
house.
mind when people put like, they're like, I don't have time to sleep. I don't have time to eat a good meal. I don't even have time to stop to drink water. And I'm like, you're not going to have time to do anything soon if you don't take care of that whole, side
That's
of
right.
life. So yeah, thank you. What a good reminder. Okay, so I'm going to be leaving all of Erica's contact details in the description of this podcast. So if you want to reach out to her or Osteopath BC, or figure out how you can start to get the support that you're looking for, that's all going to be there for you. Thank you so much for joining me
Oh, you're
today,
welcome. Thank you for
Erica.
having me so much, Jessica. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this was fantastic. All right, goodbye, everyone.